Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. My name is Michelle Hairston, and I'm the Senior Vice President of HR for Pulte Group and a proud member of our Diversity and Inclusion Board. I will be serving as the moderator for us today during our town hall. February is Black History Month, and as we celebrate, we're grateful to have Brian Anderson and Philip Holloman, both members of our Board of Directors, here with us today. Brian and Philip have led extraordinary careers. Brian has served as the Chief Financial Officer of two large multinational companies, OfficeMax and Baxter International. Philip is the former president and COO of Cintas Corporation, a large Fortune 500 company. Both of these gentlemen also currently serve on other boards in addition to Pulte Group. Today, Brian and Philip are here to share with us a little bit about their journeys, both personally and professionally, as well as some of the wisdom they have gained along the way. We are thrilled to have over 800 of our colleagues join us today for this town hall. And please note that while you're on mute for this conversation, we would like it to be interactive. And so please share your questions for Brian and Philip using the Zoom Q&A function, and we will try to get to as many of your questions as we can in this hour. I'm eager to hear your stories, so let's begin, gentlemen. Brian and Philip, you've both had accomplished business careers. Tell us a little bit more about yourselves personally and professionally. And Brian, we'll start with you.
Okay, thanks, Michelle. And first of all, my best wishes and hope for a quick recovery for all of our colleagues affected by the really bad weather in Texas and the failure of the grid. I'll just be brief. I grew up in Jamaica and middle-class family. My mom was a high school teacher in math, English, and music. I have no talent in music, but she taught at a Catholic school for years. I am the youngest of three children, and my eldest sister had a real challenge during delivery that resulted in brain damage from a forceps delivery. So much of her life has been very challenged, and she's clearly the brightest of the three of us. I went to an all-boys boarding school in Jamaica, and most of my time there was focused on sports. So there were no girls. Sports was really where I spent most of my waking hours with, soccer, cricket, and track and field. If you're from Jamaica, you have to be able to run. I left Jamaica right after high school to come to college in the States. Came to Washington, D.C. To attend Howard University. One of the oldest historically Black colleges in the country, and did an undergraduate degree in accounting. And after Howard, I did my MBA at Indiana University in finance and accounting. The best part of my years at Howard was that's where I met my wife. We got married actually in sophomore year in the chapel on campus. So I grew up pretty fast, let me put it that way. In sophomore year also, I was playing on the soccer team, but didn't finish the season because obviously working full-time, being married and trying to do 21 credits wasn't great time management. But it was a fantastic team. I couldn't finish the season, but our team was the first historically Black college to win Division I NCAA in soccer in 1971, and actually won it again in 1974. Really great years there, and I'm certainly look forward to sharing more of my career with those of you who took the time to join us today. And thanks for doing that. Philip?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Really glad to be a part of the Pulte team. joining the board just recently. I grew up in a small town, Middletown, Ohio, which is between Dayton, Ohio, and Cincinnati, and actually moved to Middletown when I was 8 in the 3rd grade. My father was a Baptist minister, and he got called to a church in Middletown. Eventually, he merged 3 small churches together to form one larger church. And I really, when I think back and I look at my leadership skills, they really evolved from that experience, observing him bringing 3 different churches together in a small town. Anybody out there who's familiar with Black Baptist churches, you would know that that is a challenge to put 3 churches together in a town like that. So that was very important. Also, my father was, this was in the early 60s, mid 60s, and into the 70s. He was the leader of the civil rights movement in Middletown and other parts of southwestern Ohio. So I had a front row seat to what it meant to go through the civil rights movement in that time, and picketing and pushing for jobs and all the things that went along with the movement back in those times. So that was very, very much influenced me as a person. And the other thing I would tell you about that situation moving to Middletown when I was 8 years old is I walked into my 3rd grade class and I met my wife at the age of 8 in the 3rd grade. And we have now been married for 42 years. We didn't get married at 8, of course. That came later. But I've actually known my wife, Gail, since I was 8 years old. Went on to University of Cincinnati and civil engineer from Cincinnati. Spent some time at Procter & Gamble. Left Procter & Gamble, spent some time with some other organizations before I joined Cintas in 1996 and started there as Vice President of Engineering and Construction. And we'll probably get to talking more about my professional career later. I have 2 adult children, 6 grandkids. Both families are here in Cincinnati, which is really, really great to be with them and be able to spend time with them. As Michelle mentioned, I do serve on as the chairman of the board for the Urban League in Southwestern Ohio. My wife and I, with the Urban League, launched a few months ago the Center for Social Justice here in Cincinnati. And then I also serve on the University of Cincinnati Board of Trustees.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing a little bit more about your backgrounds. Both of you started talking about this. I'd love to pick up on that. I think we can all agree that 2020 has been an eye-opening year for many, better appreciating the injustices and disparities in America, especially regarding race. What would you share about your experience as a minority in America, and adding on to some of your beginning comments? Maybe Philip, we'll start with you and then move to Brian.
All right. You know, I think back on it, Michelle, you know, even as young as 9 or 10 in Middletown, Ohio, which is obviously a, quote, northern city, we had establishments back then, and these things had an impact on me, where Black people could not go, or we had restaurants downtown where Black people could not go in the front door, had to go in the back door. And so it's just not that long ago in terms of how these situations have impacted me throughout my life. As I mentioned, my father led the civil rights movement in Middletown, and a lot of work around being able to work at stores downtown. And so the things that you hear about today, they are not generations old. It happened in my generation. And so those things obviously had a big impact on me, but not in terms of so much being a victim or putting me down, as much as it did inspired me to go on and overcome any of those situations. I would also tell you that when at the University of Cincinnati, we started the Society of Black Engineers there to get more focus. We also, since the University of Cincinnati, the engineering school has a co-op program. I was very fortunate, solid student, but Procter & Gamble came on campus and for my co-op assignments, and they specifically said they wanted African-American students. They wanted to interview African-American students. And so I started my co-op experience with Procter & Gamble. And again, and that was in the early 70s, around 74-ish. But Procter & Gamble was very much focused on diversity and inclusion and specifically wanted to interview African-American students. So that was important that happened at that point in my time in my career. And then we went from there.
Fantastic, thank you.
Well,
Brian?
for me, it was a little different. Growing up in, Jamaica, which is tiny and certainly a majority Black population. So, making the transition coming to the United States, especially in the late 60s, which was obviously, a high degree of civil unrest with the assassinations of Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King. And then you had the Vietnam War as well. So just a lot of turmoil. And then being at a historically Black college, obviously this got a lot of focus, not just in the classroom, but certainly we benefited from, I remember speeches on the main campus lawn, the quad, with virtually all of the activists, Stokely Carmichael, Rap Brown, Angela Davis, etc. I remember it like it was yesterday. So a lot of passion, I think a lot of student activism. Obviously the Black Panthers were also on campus. And so, the things that they were doing around breakfast programs and feeding programs in the community surrounding campus was, very impactful for those of us on campus. So, I got my first exposure to really the worst of racism during this period. And at the same time, I think it was such a juxtaposition because I came to this country kind of full of optimism, a lot of enthusiasm, and then this kind of hit me in the face. And at the same time, when I spoke to my parents, particularly my mother, she said, yeah, it's challenging, but Brian, there's no better place in the world for you to be able to reach your full potential. As long as you, focus on why you're there, your education, and work hard. And certainly, persevere and don't get sidetracked, by the noise. Focus on what the best you can be. Maintain a positive outlook, and you'll have some luck along the way. And so that has become kind of my own North Star, if you will.
Hey, Brian.
I did well at Howard. I was straight A student in accounting and graduated with a 3.8 GPA. So I was kind of ready to go to work. And then I was shocked that I couldn't get an interview with the big 8 firms, which was really the place to be if you were an aspiring young accountant. So that was quite a blow, and I refused to just take a job in the government, which a lot of my friends did. And I think out of that, came a silver lining where my dean at Howard, who was one of my first mentors, helped me get an application into the graduate school at Indiana, which was his alma mater. And he called the dean and said, hey, I'm sending this young man to Bloomington he's a good guy and do what you can to help him. So I got in my little Ford Pinto, drove to Bloomington and got in, got a full scholarship. And in addition to that, a teaching fellowship, which pleased my mom, because being a teacher, she was just delighted that I was actually teaching kids. And that was another transition, in the sense that this was the first time that I was actually competing with whites in an academic setting in my life. And certainly, I took that as added motivation to do well. And I think that, my mom always told me, if it's in a book, you can learn it. So I felt like it's always a level playing field, as long as we're using the same course material and textbooks, etc. And I really enjoyed IU because I got, as you do in graduate school, a lot of it's casework, and you're working with really multiracial teams. And I made some really great friendships that continue to this day. Graduated with honors, and finished in the final year. I took the CPA exam, had the third highest score in the state of Indiana, and then finally got to the Big 8 by being accepted to join Deloitte, or Touche Ross at the time, in their Chicago office, where I stayed for the first half of my career, about 15 years. Ultimately becoming a partner in the audit practice in DC. So I do believe in, and I think, silver linings and looking for the positives out of negative experiences in life that somehow work out to the better.
Hey, Brian, let me ask you a question. As you went into that first corporate position, and what you shared about your background, how was it for you? Because I know I have my own experiences having, none of my family was from corporate America, so to speak, didn't have any real exposure to that. How was it for you going into that environment initially?
I think on most clients, I was the only Black person on the team. One of my early mentors was a senior manager by the name of Arun Deva, who was Indian. And he recruited me, and he put me on his largest client, which was a major company in the Chicago area. So he showed his confidence in me, made me feel very welcome on that team. And I think over time, I think your competence in a profession like accounting, I think, does really speak volumes, maybe more than your color. That doesn't mean that there isn't, people who doubt your ability. And particularly when you're serving clients. And, I've had some bad experiences during those years, and clients that, weren't comfortable with me being on their account, et cetera. But the firm was always very supportive, and I was never really taken off any accounts, for that reason. And it taught me early on that what really matters is how you serve customers, and in this case, how you serve clients. And if you do a good job meeting their needs and responding to their requirements and providing good advice, you're kind of, the competence does go a long way
right.
in that regard.
Yeah, I know.
The services setting is a little different than the corporate side.
Yeah, I know. For me, it was a matter, as you've talked about. You got to get in there, get the job done, make a difference, do the task. I always also felt like I needed to make improvements to the process or the work, and make it better, so that I wasn't just executing what had always been done, but I think by working to make it better, that got me the right kind of exposure and whatnot. But it was also very important, and you mentioned this, to have advocates, because there will be issues, and you can run into, even whether we see it or not, but there can be issues out there around race or anything else, personalities, and You need to have advocates who know your worth and your value and as a person, so that when needed, they may have to either come to bat for you or support you in a promotion or getting a different opportunity. So I always tell young people that you need a network of advocates, people that not only know what you do, but know who you are, know you as a person.
Yep. And I found too in the years at Deloitte that I never let the small stuff rattle me too much. I remember specifically the further up you go, I guess, in most of these careers, the more lonely it is as a Black male. And I had a client that was going public. I think a second year as a partner. And with any company going public, there's usually a big all hands meetings with the investment bankers, the attorneys for the bankers, the attorneys for the company, et cetera. And so we're gathered in this big kickoff meeting, and I was kind of huddled with my team, making sure we had our act together. And then someone said, why don't we get started? And the investment banker said, well, the Touche partner isn't here yet. So that's kind of the way the meeting started.
But you were in the room?
Yeah, I was in the room. But he was obviously, looking for a white partner with gray hair.
Right.
But I think I couldn't let that cause me to have a reaction that would not have me, rise to the moment and the importance for what I was there to do.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Guys, it's clear to see how some of these early experiences really developed in you the passion for what you focused on, leaders in your careers. And I know the organizations you've worked with have had a focus and have a focus on culture as much as Pulte Group does. And from my interaction with both of you, I know how that important culture and diversity are to both of you. Maybe share with us some of the successful ways or attributes you've seen in terms of building a diverse and welcoming culture, either that you brought to your organizations or that you would give us advice around what we can do as teammates to ensure there's that sponsorship and so that welcomeness and the things that you just talked about.
Yeah, for me, Michelle, I'll just fast forward to when I got to Cintas as Vice President of Engineering and Construction. Quick story. We had a location in inner city Detroit that was having problems, and they were the frontline employees there were threatening to form a union because of the problems that they were having. Now, this was the first year that I got there in 1996, maybe moving into 97. And Bob Kohep, our CEO at the time, came to me and wanted me to go to Detroit to talk to the frontline partners. At Cintas, we call our employees partners, frontline partners, because all of the frontline partners, hourly workers, were African American. All the managers, all the technicians that interface with the customers were all white. And so they wanted me to go there and I was willing to do it. And I went up and did that. And I won't go through that whole story. But went up and talked to them. I came back. And when I got back, Bob asked me, how did it go? And I told him. And I said, but Bob, one of the things that I found very, very interesting and disappointing, that we are in inner city Detroit. All of the hourly workers are Black. All the managers and people that interface with the customers are white. And I said, how could that be in Detroit? And he said to me, Philip, great observation. And the other thing that impressed me about him was he said, as a white man, I never would have noticed that. And with that, we launched our diversity and inclusion initiative inside of Cintas in 97, where we really started to look at that. You know, one of my points to the Centos leadership team is that we were growing so fast, and there's a pool of talent, African Americans, other minorities, even women in general. There's a pool of talent that we're not tapping into to get ready for all this phenomenal growth that we're having, because the white guys are out there hiring people in their own image. And so that really launched our diversity and inclusion initiative. We brought in a third-party organization that went throughout the entire company at all management levels and did a 2 or 3 day training on diversity and inclusion, bias, implicit bias, etc. And that was very, very helpful. We also started to recruit at historically Black colleges with a lot of emphasis on Florida A&M and North Carolina A&T. Not so much Howard, Brian, but really got a lot of talent out of those schools, and so that really launched the effort. And it was really about having to bring in that third-party organization to do the training, and then also having specific initiatives and programs that were ensuring that we were bringing in talent, African-American talent, again, women in this very male-dominated industry. And then we also did recruiting at other events where you had African-Americans with experience in MBAs. We were interviewing them so that we could actually slot them in at a higher level to help the organization take off and feed the pipeline, but also put in some middle managers right away. So it was very intentional, and it had to be intentional, and we measured our results.
Yeah, for me, very early in my professional career in public accounting, the first opportunity to really participate in this was really to play a lead role in recruiting. And ultimately, I had responsibility for recruiting at both my alma mater, Howard, as well as the University of Virginia. And the recruiting effort was in large measure focused on trying to increase the funnel, the incoming folks coming into the profession. And then the next challenge was, how do you retain and convince people to pass the CPA exam, et cetera. And this continues to this day to be a major challenge. And fast forward, I'm now on the board of the Center for Audit Quality with all of the CEOs of the big 4 firms now. And all of those efforts are frankly still continuing because, you know, as a profession, the accounting profession is not where it needs to be, but there's clear recognition that there's huge untapped potential across all of their business lines for where diversity and inclusion can make a big impact. And there's a strong commitment in that regard.
Right.
On the corporate side, at Baxter, I was part of the Diversity Council, much like you know, Philip talked about in terms of bias training and all of those activities to raise awareness. And what I've learned is that this is really a long and sustained effort that's needed. It can't be flavor of the month, and it really takes the commitment of senior leadership and people walking the talk and incorporating it into the value system of the organization. And when there is unacceptable behavior, taking pretty swift and firm action where people go outside the boundaries of what the culture that we're trying to build is. So at Baxter, you know, I had a platform as CFO, so I was pretty involved in NABA, the National Association of Black Accountants. Got Baxter recruiting at several of the historically Black colleges. We had a finance development program. It was a pretty large finance organization. So we hired, maybe 50, 60 people a year in the US into the function. And so getting more African Americans and other minorities into our system was a pretty important initiative and yielded very good results. So.
Let me just add a couple of points, Michelle. One of the things that at Cintas, when we went through the diversity and inclusion training, it wasn't just about race, sex. It also talked about the diversity in styles and different people operate and interact in different ways. White males are not monolithic. They interact and act in different ways. So it really expanded to get people to understand that diversity in all of its forms can be an advantage if you take advantage of it. And so I wanted to make that point. And then the other point with the HBCUs, again, we were very, very intentional and developed relationships. And one of the things for us, which is probably different for the companies that Brian worked with, is that when we went to those campuses, those students had never heard of Cintas. They didn't know anything about that industry. And so it was also a big part of introducing them to this new industry that they knew nothing about. And even though people know houses are being built, I don't know that they're necessarily aware with Pulte with this industry and how big it is and what the great opportunities are. And so we really had to market to those students from a Cintas perspective, this company, this industry, because they knew nothing about it.
Those are great points, gentlemen, and I think very resonant to opportunities within our organization. I'd love to kind of just reiterate a couple of things I think we all can do within the organization that you all just reflected on. I think the first one, as you just said, Philip and Brian, challenging ourselves on where we're looking for talent. And all of us are talent ambassadors, no matter what our role, manager or not in this organization. And I think similar to Cintas, a lot of people don't know who Pulte Group is, and real estate sometimes is not the first industry people are attracted to. And so the opportunity to make people aware of who we are and ensuring we're going to a broader net of talent and targeting organizations and partnerships that can yield more diversity is really an opportunity for every single member at Pulte Group to do, regardless of their role and level.
One quick thing, Granger, where I'm on the board, been on the board for about 20 plus years, they had the same issue at Howard. And one way we solved it was we took, I think, the top 20 students from the school to Chicago on the corporate jet with the dean of the school, and then did some programs to introduce Granger products to the university itself. And it really went a long way in terms of connecting the dots for them, in terms of the buzz you got on the ground with students, with them flying in a corporate jet.
Right.
More importantly, we then gave each of those students projects in different parts of campus, particularly around environmental issues and how Granger's products help the environment, et cetera, that created a learning opportunity for them as well. So.
Very good, thank you. In the interest of time, I'm going to move off this topic to another question that we got in advance of this call by many employees. And that's, gentlemen, what's the best piece of advice that you've received that's had a positive impact on your career?
Okay, I'm gonna be a little flippant here. The best piece of advice that I got was that there is not one best piece of advice. I've gotten so much advice and all of it beneficial. I think that is so important that you're always a sponge for learning and observing and watching people and watch people that are doing it wrong and learn from that and don't do that, and watch people who are doing it right and learn from that and utilize that. But for me, it's always been about you in whatever position you're in. You need to get results. Don't ever think that you don't need to get results. You need to get results, and you need to make improvements. And that was also very important to me, and the advice that I got, that you got to improve the process. Whatever you're working on, improve the process, make it better. And that's really how you make the company better, and you get exposure and get recognized. Be flexible and take risks. I had a quick story situation where we had a lot of success with Six Sigma. At that time, I was the vice president of distribution and production planning. A lot of success when we launched Six Sigma. They came to me and said that they wanted me to be the executive champion to deploy Six Sigma throughout the entire company. And I told them that, not them, I told Scott Farmer, my boss at the time, the CEO, that I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to be in that type of staff position. I really had gotten into operations, and this company was about operations and sales, and that's where I wanted to be. And we went back and forth, 4 different conversations, him saying he wanted me to do it, me saying I didn't want to do it. And finally, in the 4th conversation, he said to me, well, Philip, I understand the problem. And I said to myself, it's about time. I've been telling you I don't want to do this, but I didn't say that out loud. And I said, well, Scott, what's the problem? And he said to me, the problem is you think this is a question. and so I became the executive champion of Six Sigma. And I tell that story because when I got into that role, it allowed me to get involved in all parts of the company: marketing, accounting, human resources, sales, because I had black belts and green belts and projects going on everywhere. So it really gave me a much deeper and broader understanding of the company. And so I tell young people a lot of times, and this is one of the better pieces of advice, Michelle, is sometimes you have to get out of your own way. You may not recognize the opportunity, you may not see the opportunity, but sometimes you have to get out of your own way in order to advance. And once I did that assignment and got that broader understanding, and then I went on to be the senior vice president of global supply chain, and then I became president and chief operating officer. I don't believe if I hadn't had that broad exposure that with my background, I would have been in a position to be the president and chief operating officer. Right?
There are a couple of things that really stuck with me. My former CEO at Baxter, before he was CEO, we really had a good working relationship. But one of the things he said to me very early on is just never forget what it was like when you were working in a cube. Regardless of what position you're in, just remember what you thought of senior leadership when you were toiling away on a spreadsheet in a cube or whatever. And that has always kind of resonated with me, because sometimes we lose sight of the perspective that people may have that don't have the benefit of as much information about the total company as we do. And this might sound trite, but I think, share your successes with your team liberally, but take responsibility for the failures, and don't blame anyone else. It's perfectly fine to take a bullet for your team, and then look at the learnings that come out of that, and how do we do better next time. And just basically, I think, treat people how you'd like to be treated, and afford that same level of courtesy. And I think that just goes a long way in my mind for teamwork.
Right. Michelle, another one that I would add is that, when you're making decisions and deciding what needs to be done, don't be so focused on your part of the business that you're sub-optimizing and potentially hurting the company as a whole, so to speak. And so I think that, I know it sounds a bit fatherhood and apple pie, but I think that you need to always be about the greater good of the company and not sub-optimizing in your particular area that could potentially have an adverse effect on the whole.
Along those lines, both of you just mentioned taking chances of failure and learning from failure, as well as kind of getting out of your own way. If we were to reflect upon a time of challenge or adversity that both of you had in your career and how you overcame it, what story would you share with us? Maybe Philip, you're nodding your head. We'll go to you.
So I became the president and chief operating officer in February of 2008. And you know what happened later on in 2008, the bottom fell out of the economy. So here I am, president and chief operating officer of this company that had, 25, 30 years of sustainable top line growth, bottom line growth. And in the first year that I was president and chief operating officer, our top line actually declined for the first time ever in the company's history, okay? And even though we were in the Great Recession, it wasn't okay for me to say, just focus on that it's the recession. That was a reality, but I had to come up with my team, and given, as Brian said, many others credit, but coming up with a strategy and plans that would allow us to come out of the Great Recession stronger as a company than even when we went into the recession. And so that had to be our focus. And we did that, over the next 18 months. We actually had gotten back to where we were with our top line, bottom line. We had streamlined the organization, taken a lot of costs out. Also, we went after new opportunities, new products, new market segments that we were going to serve. So that was a very, very challenging time, being new in this role. The Great Recession hits. We don't grow our top line and bottom line for the first time in the history of the company. And people are looking to me, the board is looking to me and my team to say, okay, what are y'all going to do? It's not okay to put your head in the sand and wait until this thing is over. Let's put plans and execute and put things in place that will allow us to come out of the recession in a much better position than we went in. And I would say that, Michelle, clearly that was one of the more challenging times in my career.
I think a couple of quick examples for me. I guess I've always found that if you're guided by doing the right thing, sometimes as tough as the decision might be, or as consequential as it might be, you end up feeling better afterwards. I was leading at Baxter a pretty large initiative to consolidate indirect spending across the entire company. A huge opportunity with significant bottom line dollars. And one of the purchase areas was freight. We were pretty much sole sourced with FedEx, and our chairman and CEO was great friends with Fred Smith, and the CEO of FedEx. And as we dug into the data, I had teams working, McKinsey was helping us, et cetera. The clearly right decision to do was, change this relationship with FedEx. And folks said, hey, Brian, this is sacrilege. You can't go to Vern with this. He and Fred go way back. They're great buddies, and there was just too much money at risk to not pursue it. And certainly Vern's initial reaction was that, no way, but then you show him the data, you spend time going through it, and you end up making the right decision. And we did change, to save, a significant amount of money. And over the course of my career, there have been many examples where there acquisitions, the one division, maybe really intent on doing. And as you go through the data, everybody is for it, but the chair that I was in, similar to Bob, sometimes you got to say no. And that, sometimes, the best deals are some of the ones we didn't do, with just the kind of the right focus and not really trying to win a popularity contest, but really trying to focus on what's right for the business long term.
Michelle, that was the singular most challenging thing in my career. But throughout my career, you've had to make decisions around personnel, and those are always tough. But you need to be consistent, be fair, and align with the culture of your company. But at times you have to make the tough decisions that people just aren't working out. And if you leave people in a position where it's not working out, you do a disservice to the company. That person becomes a blocker to others moving forward. It just has so many ramifications, and that person potentially could start to influence in a negative way the culture and what you're trying to accomplish. So, you have to be willing to make those tough personnel decisions. And one of the things that I've always said for me personally as a leader is I think about this. I think about friendly, not friends. You have to be careful to distinguish between friendly and friends, because if it gets too emotional and it's friends, it may lock you up and you may not be able to make the decisions that you need to make. So I know that's a big mark, but it's real.
Yeah, the toughest ones for me are people that really do live the values and are role models in certain aspects of the culture. But at the end of the day, they're not delivering.
Right.
Yes.
And very nice people, etc. And I think young managers really need to learn that, because sometimes you've got to really make those decisions. And the toughest one for me was a young man that was actually the son of one of my mentors at Baxter.
Wow.
And after he had retired, his son, we really tried. And he was in multiple jobs. And eventually the guys came to me and said, this isn't working out. And it wasn't my decision to terminate him, but I had to know about it and support my manager that came to that decision, knowing that the process was fair. I went to his dad, told him why we had to do what he did, and he understood. And they were good friends of mine, but his wife never forgave me. But that's, we're all people, right? And so these are sometimes tough calls.
Gentlemen, I'm going to move us along here because I want to get to some questions from our audience that we've had come in today. But it's clear to see great messages of courage and humility as you talked about overcoming those challenges and adversity in your career. So some great lessons in that. Thank you for sharing. For those of you on the line here who've shared some questions for us today, and there have been many, thank you for participating. And we're going to get to the first one here. In your career, have you ever felt the pressure to be better just because of your race? And tell us about that.
For me, that pressure is somewhat self-induced. I think that I think being Black, I feel a natural intent to work harder and do better, to have an even, to help level the playing field. I put that pressure on myself.
Yeah, for me, Michelle, it's a matter of, this may sound a little egotistical, but I wanted to be better because I wanted to keep moving up and doing bigger and better things. So I was driven to be better because I wanted to continue to grow my career, because I thought I could have a bigger and better impact on the company in a leadership position. So that was more the driver. Now, at the same time, I recognize, being in the positions that I've been in, that others, African Americans, are looking at me and thinking, wow, Philip got there, he's doing this. So I recognize that responsibility, and that many are going to view it that way, that an African American made it, got to this position, etc. But quite honestly, I was more driven by just wanting to get to the position I got to.
Gentlemen, thank you for that. Maybe a related question here. You both mentioned your parents. I think we have a lot of parents on the line today. Black parents often tell their children they have to work twice as hard to get half as far. What have you told the young people in your life, your children, grandchildren, your nieces and nephews, or anybody who's worked for you, to help them reach their potential and get noticed?
Well, for me, I would say, first of all, and I've heard that type of statement before, but if you're in a situation where you have to work twice as hard to get half as far, you are probably in an environment and a culture that you probably shouldn't be in. And so I know that sounds kind of easy, but for me, it's a matter of, working hard, doing the right thing, and working smart and being strategic, and taking charge of your career. And sometimes you have to decide at a particular company that this culture is not right for me, and I need to move to a different culture that I feel more comfortable in, and that I feel like I can move my career along. So I don't really subscribe to being Black. I have to work twice as hard to get half as far. I wouldn't want to work in a culture that demanded that of me, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, I have a daughter and with an MBA, and our conversations are generally around, being results oriented, being collaborative, looking across the entire enterprise and seeing where you can add value,
Right.
and finding good mentors within that structure. That will help you reach your full potential, but you've got to own your own development and not necessarily look for others to manage your career. You've got to really be purposeful about your development, and then use resources that are available to you if you're in the right type of environment that will help you in that regard.
Right. And Brian, I agree with that. That was stated very well. Great advice. And sometimes it's a matter of, when you look at opportunities, it may be better to go sideways to get broader experience before you go up. And sometimes if you don't get that opportunity to go up, and you sit there and say, I should have had that opportunity. But I would always coach people that the broader your set of skills and expertise will position you to have more options in terms of moving up. So if that's your desire to move up.
And it may not even have to be a lateral. It could be special projects,
right,
that cut across the business, that are cross-functional,
right,
that are oriented towards solving an important business problem that gets you new friends and colleagues,
right,
and drives a lot of new learning and appreciation for other parts of the business. So.
And expands your network of advocates. And so when people are sitting around the table and saying, well, who should get this assignment? You want people at that table saying your name, because they know you.
Yeah.
Thank you, gentlemen. Another question from our colleagues on the phone here. Did you ever feel the pressure to change how you look or how you talk to fit into corporate America? As a first-generation Mexican-American, I found this aspect of myself challenging to fit in early in my career. Did this happen to you?
Not in my case. I've not had that experience.
Not really in my case either. I've always been authentic me. with the background that I have coming from where, you know, how I grew up and whatnot, I just didn't feel the need to do that. Even when I joined Cintas, there was a kind of an unwritten but very strong rule that you couldn't have facial hair. And I came in there with a beard and I kept the beard. I don't have it now, but you know, yeah, I think it's so important that you can't lose who you are because you'll get lost. You can get lost.
Great advice, Philip and Brian, and it's clear to see.
But Michelle, let me say this though. There is a time and a place for everything, right? And sometimes you need to be strategic on maybe how you approach a certain situation because there is a time and a place for everything.
Thank you. We have so many great questions and I wish we could get to them all. But let's, I think we have time for one more here. So let's end on Brian and Philip. We know there remains a long road ahead to achieving racial equality. What makes you most hopeful that we're going to get there?
I think in a word, young people. I think that the better job we do with education and the more that the corporate sector steps up and plays a key role in this transformation, because the politics in this country right now are so divided that I'm really encouraged by what I'm seeing in the circles, you know, the business roundtable, companies like Pulte and other boards that I'm on, that it's our responsibility to lead, much like you know, quite frankly, the military did, you know, back in the day. But I think CEOs of large companies and boards and leadership, I think, have a real special responsibility, because if we don't figure this out, I think it's going to be to our collective detriment. And I hope that the events of this past summer was enough of a wake-up call to the country recognizing how destructive this is.
Yep. Yeah, Michelle, for me, it's right along those same lines. I think this past year, the past few years, have really turned out to be a wake-up call that for any of us thought that we had progressed so far, it was behind us and we're making so much progress. This past year was really a wake-up call that said that we're not as far along on this journey as we thought we were, and that I agree with Brian that companies, politicians, companies are going to have to take a stand and come forward, and leaders of those companies are going to have to take a stand and come forward because it just demonstrated that we're not as far along as we collectively thought we were. And I see that happening. I see that happening, that people will come forward, that it's a wake-up call for people, and some may have been shocked because they thought we were at a different place. But that's what gives me hope.
Thank you. Brian and Philip, thank you both so very much for your time today and your stories and your wisdom. I know all of us took many great moments and advice from this conversation. Speaking for our colleagues today, this was an amazing hour. One I know we could have probably spent twice the time.
Absolutely.
Questions. And Pulte Group colleagues out there on the line for us today, thank you for your time and participation as well in this town hall. And we look forward to speaking again with you in the future. And everybody have a great afternoon. Philip and Brian, thank you again. We appreciate it.
Okay, thanks everybody.
Celebrate Black History Month.
Stay safe. Stay safe.
Take care.